Hello, I'm Shabria Kennedy, and here's my incubator interview process that I did with David Cross. So, David Cross is actually an assistant director from Towson University Incubator, and one of the first things I asked him was what was the most exciting company that he's worked with, and it was a company called Vocabulary, which was a vocabulary company that really worked to put vocabulary words with pictures to help for children who are struggling in an area of literacy. I thought this was really interesting because I work with kids specifically in the area of literacy, and so it was nice to hear more about that and hear more about the company. And he also said it was exciting because the team worked well together. They spent a lot of time, and it took many years for the product and the service to actually launch. And he kind of was like with them through that, you know, every step of the way. And so that's what he really enjoyed. And it was exciting to kind of see their process come to pass. I asked two or three other questions. Mainly, what was his critical piece of information to give to entrepreneurs? And he said the very first thing is to solve a problem. And so, if you don't have a problem to solve, then most likely your product or service is not going to be appreciated. And then he said, with that, you need to find an investor who is willing to pay for that same, solution that you're pitching in order to solve your problem. And so having a problem and then a way to solve the problem is really like the key things that was like taken out of this. And then after going through that process, when you get to a place of getting feedback and criticisms, like being willing to pivot or deviate from the initial plan. And he said because sometimes entrepreneurs come in who are very passionate and are not willing to take any form of critique, criticism, or feedback. And he said, and that actually really hinders the success of that product or service. Moving on to the next question, which really flowed into this about what if he's seen companies fail? And he said when they don't have a cohesive management team, that actually really hinders the product, the service, and the results of that product or service process. He said that most of the time it's either because they're not on the same page, there's some dynamic issues, there's some people not really getting a say and just no like community or group engagement, which really hinders the entire process of pitching a product or a service. And he also said that there are a lot of people who come in who are technologists, and they often rely a lot on the technology and the ability to create the technology and not the problem, which kind of goes back to like the most important aspects that you should know as an entrepreneur is your problem and then to solve it. And he said also timing was a really big issue because sometimes the product is or service is amazing, but the market is just not ready to get a product like that. And so he said that's a huge hindrance for a lot of people who come through the incubator. And so I asked for a company timeline, and he said that like averagely it takes 3 to 5 years to launch a product or service in the educational sector, and that it takes 10 to 15 years to launch a product or service in the science or technology sector. And so he said there's a lot of time and patience required in order to be an entrepreneur, in order to get your product out there. He said some people, it takes them 2 years to kind of do that. He said some people, it takes them 20 to 30 years. And so you kind of never know. It just depends on the product and how the market is going to respond to it. And so I asked what was the biggest benefits of being at the Towson incubator system or incubator service more so than any other. And he said predominantly it's because they are like so focused on educational technology that, most of the companies who come in are in educational space. And so with having an educational space means educational resources and, professionals who have been in the field to be able to give their input that a lot of other places do not have that aspect. Another aspect that a lot of places don't have is Towson has an investor in residence. And so with them having someone who already knows, who already sees pitches like this, it really gives an opportunity to kind of like hone in and get that constructive, criticism or feedback that they actually need for their product or service to be successful. And then because going back to being in an educational space, Towson is historically a teaching college, and so there are tons and tons of trained professionals because predominantly it was based on training people to teach other people. And then Towson's Incubator allows both students and non-students to come in and jump onto the process of getting their product and service out there and working to, make it better through the incubator. And the incubator requires anyone who comes in to kind of have an MVP, which is a minimum viable product. And so they're not starting from scratch, but they're starting from somewhere and they're like, moving on to it. My thoughts was that I enjoyed my interview with David. He was very helpful and willing to work with me. I learned a lot about what it takes to even, be in an incubator, what it is, and what is being looked for when starting that process. Some of the goods and the bads, which I think was great, and made me think about the next steps that I need to take in becoming an entrepreneur. And so this is David's LinkedIn page. He doesn't have any other form of media or website, but other than what's on Towson's website. But he said that if anybody was interested in contacting him, that this is the best way to do it, and an email or even just calling his office because he's there most of the time. And so I really enjoyed this. And yeah, thank you for watching.